and sense of community here that is just such, in the midst of the strife and challenges in my life, this is my rock, and that's why I keep coming back.
When we have issues or celebrations, they're always there to share with us.
What I love most about this church is that it feels like a family. I know everyone in the church, and I know that if I had a problem, I could go to anyone, and I've grown up in this church, and I really like the feeling you get when you're here.
It's grown to be something much deeper, more emotional. The love, and I love being in the choir and singing.
It's very shepherding of its youth, very inclusive, and those things combined, I think, make it a very special faith community.
This church seems to accept people of all different kinds of views and different ways of doing things, and it's okay, and I like that about this church.
And the fact that it was founded by the Japanese in 1903, we have really enjoyed getting to know the diversity in the church, and I think the thing that is so amazing is that the people in this church embody the Spirit of Christ, and in such a quiet way.
We have had pastors ever since who, with a variety of preaching styles and personalities, yet every one of them have been spiritual leaders for us.
Sincerity, sincere friendships, sincere people, and they complete us each week. When things get hectic and you just are struggling to get by, and then you come and you see your church family and you feel the sincerity and the love, and it completes you and it keeps you going.
I guess the activities we do are fun, and yeah, going to church makes you feel closer to God, especially a contemporary service.
A wonderful source of friendships, working with people who, in my opinion, have got their values in the right place and are willing to put their effort in doing some of the things that really need to be done.
So it's the fellowship and the friendliness and feeling like you belong.
Through NYF and CAF and all the JCF and all the youth groups that I've been to, lots of good friends, Pam and Jackie, of course, and teaching faith explorations, going through confirmation. That was awesome. And here at Family Camp, I've spent 2 whole evenings playing Mexican Train, which I got taught by the elder ladies of the church. That good times.
And the new people come along, this spirit's contagious. It's just a wonderful thing, and it keeps bringing me and my family back here.
I just love the people at our church. They have just, I don't know, they're just wonderful. They're friendly and they just envelop you.
As I've grown and changed, the church has grown and changed, and so what brings me here today is not maybe exactly the same thing that brought me here when I began with here in like 1965.
Favorite thing? The potlucks, because you get to eat a lot.
Loomis First United Methodist Church was founded in 1903 when a small group of Japanese Christians met in the home of Mr. and Mrs. Sugasawa for worship and prayer. This group became the first Japanese Christian fellowship in Placer County and included Mr. and Mrs. Komataro Sugasawa, Shinzo Sakuma Makabe, and Kanematsu Igarashi. In 1904, Reverend Morizo Yoshida came once a month from the Japanese Methodist Church in Sacramento to minister the Loomis group. In 1906, the Reverend Genshichi Tsuruda became the first part-time minister assigned to the fellowship. Finally, in 1911, the fellowship was recognized as the Loomis Japanese Methodist Episcopal Church. In 1913, the church appointed its first full-time minister, the Reverend Yukichi Naito. Prior to and including 1913, before the enactment of the California Alien Land Law, a total of approximately 15 families supported the church, including 6 owning their own land. The Alien Land Law prohibited Japanese aliens after 1913 from owning land.
I live on a ranch that I was born on in 1923. My father came to this church about 1913, but he was here in the United States since 1903. Well, I was raised in this, the Methodist Church. It used to be the Episcopal Church of, Loomis, Japanese Episcopal Church it was called. And my father, he was quite a leader in this church. He was even the superintendent at a Sunday school, and so he brought us to church every Sunday, and we had to pay strict attention. If we're sitting in church, if some of us boys start talking, he come and stops us, says, "Be attention," So he was a very strict disciplinarian. So we were brought up that way.
In the face of many challenges, this dedicated and courageous group made a decision to purchase the present 10-acre site for $800 and began making plans for a parsonage and sanctuary. The parsonage was built in 1914 and construction of the sanctuary began in 1915. The total cost was $2,000. The new chapel was completed in November 1916. A group photograph was taken of the consecration service held on November 12, 1916.
With the new church now established, the next 26 years involved hard work, gradual growth, and growing families. To support the church, members tilled the 10 acres and also contributed their earnings from picking and pruning projects on neighboring farms. Many sacrifices were made. The Immigration Act of 1924 prevented further Japanese immigration, and the social climate at that time was hostile and exclusive. A strong community was formed within the church for mutual support to pass on the heritage of culture and religion and to deal with the handicap of language. The Reverend Shuichi Takada served as the resident minister from 1922 through 1926. During the 1920s, the church initiated a tradition of sharing buildings with the larger community, which continues to this day. The Loomis Grammar School used the building at the left for their first grade class. Mrs. Parsons was the teacher. From the mid-20s through 30s, there were 4 Caucasian teachers in our church. They did much to inspire and instill love of music in the children. Mrs. Gherkin was superintendent of the Sunday school. Mr. Charles Nitta was also a superintendent of the Sunday school.
We learned a lot how to present ourselves to the public. We had church programs, and a lot of us were shepherds, or the women were maybe angels, or they were Mary.
In the late 1930s, the Nisei, second-generation Japanese Americans, became increasingly active in the church as Sunday school teachers, music leaders, sports activity leaders, and fellowship members. Among the Sunday school teachers at that time were Mrs. Takagishi and Mrs. Nitta.
Right out there in the Japanese garden, there's a big oak tree and a rock. There was a little indentation there. There used to be a great big walnut tree over there, black walnut. And after Sunday school, we used to go and collect the black walnuts and put them on that rock there and hit it with a brick. And black walnuts are difficult to eat, but then we used to get our hands all black.
Be playing outside while the Issei, the first generation, the Japanese-speaking generation, were having their services in Japanese, so we would be outside playing, and they would send people out from time to time to hold it down, quiet.
We used to sit on the slide and eat our grapes while our Sunday school teacher is trying to teach us something. Yeah. And like the kids today, we were very hyper.
In 1936, the church sponsored a Japanese language school under the leadership and guidance of Reverend and Mrs. I. Haratani. The school was to help acquaint the Nisei with their ethnic, cultural heritage and language. Among the many activities in the church in these years were Christmas pageants, Epworth League youth retreats at American River, and family get-togethers such as church picnics.
Being I came from a all-Caucasian area, I came over here and all I see was Japanese, people.
It was more Japanese here than it was in Fair Oaks?
Yeah, Fair Oaks, there were just maybe one family, two families, and us. So we really didn't know what it was to be in a community where there was a lot of Japanese.
Our church bazaar evolved from the penny arcade and bingo concessions held on church premises during this period to augment the church treasury. December 7, 1941 marked the beginning of a devastating disruption in the lives of the Japanese Americans. By May 1942, all members of the church had been evacuated and the doors of the church were boarded shut until the end of the war.
It was a Sunday afternoon, December 7, 1941, when the Pearl Harbor, they came screaming out and says, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. We couldn't believe it. So we came back and listened to the radio for the next half hour, and we had to be convinced that that's all you heard on the radio. So that was a very perplexing, frustrating experience to hear something like that, because we had no idea that there was any antagonistic feeling between the countries.
So they boarded up the church, People put some of the furniture in there, but the church was boarded up, and it was never open till in 1945 when the people start coming back to Loomis.
Oh yeah, it was shut down because we even put some stuff in here, but it wasn't there evidently because I was still overseas when my parents came back, and they left a lot of things here, but being nailed down doesn't mean anything. I guess they go through the windows or someplace, but most of the stuff was missing.
Issei leaders in the community were immediately detained as threats to the nation's security and imprisoned. Tomihachi Otani was one of these leaders. He was incarcerated in a prison located in Bismarck, North Dakota.
They put out big signs out there all over Placer County that we had so many days and that we were being evacuated. And in the meantime, they had restrictions on how late we can stay out and the miles we can go. The War Relocation Authority, they sent out the posters on power poles and stuff, and on the radio. We listened to the radio a lot. We didn't have any TV, so we listened to the radio a lot and then read the newspaper. We had the Sacramento Union at the time. Oh, I remember in Loomis, when the train pulled up to the depot there, the depot was right there, basically where it is now, but there used to be a fruit shed, and the fruit shed used to have trains that they used, troop trains or whatever you want to call it. I can still remember their army drab color, and they put us in there, and the windows, we can look out the windows and wave goodbye to our friends that were sending us off. But as soon as we start moving, they closed all the windows so that we couldn't see where we were going.
How did that feel?
Oh, it's an uncertain, uneasy feeling, because you don't know what's going to happen or where we're going. However, you're not the only one. You're with a carload of other people, so you just make conversation, make the best of it.
We were moved to Arboga, California, where it was an assembly center No, we stayed in Arboga for about a month or so, I think. And that was about as long as that camp could stand it, because it was pretty bad. The outhouses were almost floating, you know. The sanitation was poor, and I was glad to see us move out of there.
Where did they go? Where did the different people go to different?
Well, this group went to Tule Lake. That would include all of Loomis and some of Sacramento.
Us Niseis were brought up by a strict disciplinarian type of parents, you know, that we're supposed to do whatever we're told, you know, we had to be good. So naturally when the evacuation came, you know, we all went what we're told to do.
Church members were dispersed to various relocation camps. This is an assembly of all Christians at Tule Lake Relocation Camp. The sign in front says, "Forward in Christ." A total of 15,000 to 17,000 internees were detained at this camp.
In 1942, and then in May, a little over 3 months later, parents go to internment camp. I guess that was probably the most roughest time of my life, when your dad especially had to go into internment camp. He tried to be a good citizen. All of us, even brothers and sisters, went into internment camp. They're citizens. Had a brother Roy going to the University of California. Senior year, he couldn't finish at school there, but he got his diploma, I think a Bachelor of Science from the University of California in Berkeley, in camp.
My brother wrote, and he said, "I'm going overseas. I might not see you, so I'd like to meet with you." So Queenie and I made a trip to Amachi to see my brother. And we were glad we went, because in March 45 he got killed. But what a place for my mother and my father to get the army to come in to tell you that your son got killed.
On Easter Sunday, 1943, a wooden cross was erected at Castle Rock at Tule Lake. The original wooden cross had deteriorated and fallen. It was replaced by a metal cross by the non-Japanese townspeople of Tule Lake. In 1982, during a pilgrimage by former camp internees, including the members of our church, a bronze plaque was installed.
So after you had done some of the working in the cannery, you actually enlisted and then went abroad?
Yeah, You're not going to get in there fast enough. I thought maybe this would be a good way to, you know, if we're going to have to prove that we're just as good as the next guy, that I'll be able to at least get in the service. And my brother was already in service and overseas, and he got banged up, and so when I was going one way, he was coming home, so I never met him. But we went overseas with that Japanese outfit.
I had a chance during my training to go to Tule Lake to visit my parents. I didn't go.
Why?
I often wondered about that. I guess I was angry. I was angry that I was in a service, and yet my parents, brothers and sisters, born and raised in America, they had to go to camp. That's always been a kind of a thing that I think about all the time.
In spite of the sustaining power of faith, family, and friendships, evacuation years were a bleak and desolate time for all Americans of Japanese ancestry. in particular those who were members of this congregation.
I came back when I was in the Army in 1944 and 45. I was still in basic training. I had an emergency furlough to come back to Loomis to drive the truck back from Idaho to California here in Loomis. My father was coming back to the home place. And then when I came back here, I took my brother to Roseville High School to enter him in high school. And when I went to the high school, I had a real royal red carpet treatment because I was in uniform. So, but the atmosphere around the town of Loomis weren't that nice, like I experienced at Roseville High School.
When church members were able to return to their homes in late 1945 and 1946, it meant breaking new ties for some. For others, it meant hard work on rundown farms or legal challenges to regain land.
Anyway, when I came back, Dad had already taken over the ranch from the teachers.
So you got to keep your property because
Yes.
they helped you.
That's right.
Teachers helped you.
That's right. We kept the property, so we were able to come home to someplace we still had, you know.
And that wasn't the case for many people.
No, that wasn't the case for a lot of people. We were very fortunate.
If people look back, they weren't worried so much about how much money we lost because of the, but it was just the fact that we got, they did what they did to us.
The church doors were reopened in 1945 under the ministry of the Reverend Norio Yazaki, who served our church for 2 years. His wife was a former Mary Takagishi. One of the first projects of our church was to work with the Pennon Buddhist Church to help the suffering people in Japan. A collection of $2,590 was sent, along with 81 large boxes of clothing.
My mother was in Wyoming, and Christmas time she was asked to help make presents for the little kids. And she said she went there and she saw these little dolls and whatnot made out of remnants. And she started thinking about it. She said, you know, we're supposed to be enemies, and some ladies somewhere got together and, gathered all this material, made this little doll so that the children of the enemies can have a Christmas. And she said, that's the thing that really started me thinking about Christianity. How would it be to be a Christian? So after graduation, she came down and she went to see Reverend Yazaki, the one you mentioned, and that's how she joined the church.
An Easter sunrise service was held on April 21st, 1946 at the Sasaki Ranch, overlooking what is now Sierra College Boulevard and Rockland Road. One result of the evacuation period was a rapid shift of leadership in the church from the Issei to the Nisei. The Issei wisely supported and encouraged their children during this transition. In 1951, a Nisei division of the church was established to serve the more than 50 second-generation English-speaking adults. The Reverend Susuma Kawano and his wife Kimi, daughter Helen, and son Stanley arrived in 1952. Under the guiding force of Mrs. Kawano, our chapter of the Nisei Women's Society of Christian Service was formed. About the same time, the church faced a pressing need for additional classroom space for the rapidly growing segment of Sansei, third-generation Japanese Americans. The Nisei responded with a decision on November 9, 1952, to build the Education Building, later renamed Kawano Hall. In January 1953, an Issei Nisei Building Committee was organized with Howard Nakai as general chairman. In March 1953, a brief groundbreaking ceremony was held, and 9 tractors roared out to begin the work of leveling and grading the site. The education building was completed and consecrated on Easter Sunday, April 26, 1953. Issei and Nisei worked together to stage a grand 50th anniversary celebration on March 7, 1954. In observance of this milestone, a special 5-day evangelism program was conducted under the leadership of Superintendent Reverend Taro Goto. In this same month, Our first Oriental Food Bazaar was held in the new education building. Total income was a whopping $555.15. I became part of this church when I married Bob, and I remember Reverend Kuana was our minister. And I guess he was concerned that I'd be more active, but I remember many, many visitations from him. So when my son Kelly was born, when he was 6 months old, I decided to be baptized along with Kelly. So we were baptized together. In 1953, a law was passed by Congress which permitted alien Japanese residents to become naturalized citizens. On May 22, 1954, church members as a group began preparations to take this step. The church was faced with the need to update its legal papers. The commitment was made to open the church doors to all. The First Methodist Church of Loomis was adopted as the new name. Reverend Kuano's sudden death from a heart attack in September 1956 brought an abrupt halt to further plans, and the leaderless Nisei were now faced with the overwhelming task of filling the needs of the pulpit in the following months.
By 1957, a sense of challenge and promise became the fiber of the church, and the need for an English-speaking pastor became imminent. The Reverend Roy Sano, now a United Methodist bishop, provided strong leadership and brought a significant increase in membership.
When I came, it was all Japanese American, and I actually even spoke in Japanese, and then we had the English language service. And about maybe 62 or 3 Anglos started to visit, and then several families came, and I guess that started a pattern.
In 1958, the Guerin Ledukes were the first Caucasian family to join our church. In 1961, Dr. Nicholas Bailey, his wife Sally, and their 7 children were the second Caucasian family members of our church. From 1962 onward, the Caucasian membership increased rapidly.
What was it that attracted you?
Well, probably the minister was, when we came, when we visited, it was such an extreme feeling that God was here in this church. And I don't think I had ever felt his presence as much in any church. And even though we were outsiders, we weren't made to feel that way. And all of the Japanese people were, even the older ones, were so gracious and so cordial and welcoming that it just felt like the right place to be.
Under Reverend Sano's leadership, our very first choir was formed. Reverend Sano was a director, so he was required to step off and on the pulpit many times. Reverend Sano's wife, Ruth, was a church organist. The organ was dedicated in memory of Reverend Kuano in April 1960.
The first Issei recognition dinner was held in 1960. The pioneers of the church were honored and recognized in many ways. David Takagishi was a regular presence at all church activities, demonstrating and teaching the art of origami.
We brought the children, and immediately after church, this little Japanese man came running over and immediately put a puzzle on in our son's buttonhole and stuck a little envelope in our daughter's pocket. And he was just wonderful, and he told our son to try to get it undone. And we had to bring the shirt back the next Sunday because we could not get it out, and he couldn't get it out. And what he had put in Julie's pocket was a little origami mobile. And of course, this was David Takagishi. And it was such a wonderful opening to our meeting this church.
The next pictures were taken on Family Fun Night in our brand new education building. The next performance was given as part of the program on Issei Appreciation Night at the Veterans Memorial Hall in Loomis, Sano accompanied all the numbers on the piano. Lovely hula hands, performed by Kunio Okusu, George Makimoto, Frank Kageta, and Nitta. Their long, sweeping eyelashes added much to their glamour.
In 1961, a master plan committee was formed for developing the church's 10 acres. The first step, a larger sanctuary. A building steering committee was formed with Rusty Rata as chairman. While planning for a new sanctuary was going forward, the Pacific Japanese Provisional Conference of the Methodist Church held its last session in May 1964. In Loomis, this change resulted in the assignment of the church's first Caucasian pastor, the Reverend John Corson, on July 1st, 1964. Reverend Tao Goto was assigned on a bi-monthly basis to minister to the Issei language group. On November 22, 1964, a groundbreaking ceremony was held in preparation for the construction of the new sanctuary and administration building. On June 27, 1965, 7 months later, the sanctuary and administration unit was completed and consecrated.
I would say we're still roughly 50-50 Japanese and Caucasians. And they had special services once a month, maybe twice a month. And sometimes they joined in with us, and they would sing their song in Japanese, and we would sing in English, and it was quite something.
The last quarter century in the life of our church has seen increase in membership and growth in ministry, program, and outreach. 5 full-time pastors have served the congregation in the past 30 years. Reverends Richard Ernst with Nancy, John, and Margot, John Sublett with Joan, Dave Bennett with Jackie, Jackie Courtwright, and Pam Cummings. Major congregational projects have been undertaken, including creation of the Japanese Memorial Garden, relocation of the original chapel, renamed Issei Memorial Hall, a special ceremony opening the 1916 cornerstone, development of a playground and picnic area, and construction of a multi-purpose building, Nisei Fellowship Hall. Programs of spiritual nurture and enrichment have continued to support the devotional life of all ages within the congregation. Worship celebrations offering opportunity to praise God in both traditional and contemporary styles, choirs and other musical ensembles that lift the spirit and give voice to our faith and hope, Sunday school classes, youth groups, and adult forums, educating all ages in the rich heritage of our Christian faith, Bible study, retreats, men's and women's groups, deepening our relationship with God. Stephen Ministry, Prayer Chain, and other networks of loving concern embody our commitment as a congregation to care for one another. Potlucks, recreational activities, family camp, all affirming our joy and delight in sharing fellowship together. Outreach projects such as Sierra Service Project and Habitat for Humanity express the congregation's commitment to offering healing and hope in Christ's name to the community and world. Finally, an event that embodies so much of the meaning of our congregational life, the Oriental Food Bazaar. The bazaar is not only a fundraising project, but an event that unites the congregation in fellowship and service, honors the Japanese heritage of our church, and makes the life of our congregation visible to the wider community.
As we come to this point in time and look toward the future, I am just aware that now is a time for us to take what has been given to us and to offer our own legacy for the future. And so as we plan and work on a renovation of the sanctuary to enlarge it, to welcome more people who will be coming in years to come that we may not even meet, I'm really excited about the possibilities and feel that that's just a natural progression for all the welcoming of new people that the church has done throughout.
As we conclude the celebration of the past 100 years in the life of our congregation, we are mindful that God calls us to a vision of the future. Rusty Aratsu and Larry Bowen have written a wonderful history of this congregation, and their concluding words seem to me to be an appropriate conclusion to this centennial year. Rusty writes these words: "As we look at the challenges ahead, may we be reminded of the heritage that is ours. What will we do with this great legacy that has been given to us? As an ongoing integrated church, we are on the threshold of writing a new page in the history of our congregation. What will this church leave to its children's children? Let us move forward together in Christian fellowship." And Larry writes, "This is not the end of our story. It is just a piece. We do have a special place. Our church is alive and well, and it moves in grace. May God continue to shed His light of approval on the First United Methodist Church of Loomis."
It was my privilege to know some of the pioneers, and I can remember officiating at the funeral for Charles Nitta, who was over 100 at the time of his death, and on that same day, one of his great-grandchildren was born, and we brought the news to the service of the birth of his great-grandson. And it was a tremendous sense of the continuity of families within the life of the church.
For my family, it has a lot of heritage, and there's a lot of history that the church preserves with especially my grandfather, my father, going through the internment process in World War II and going through that hardship. And also today our church has a very active youth group, and I've been actively involved with that as a youth leader. I think my sons get a different base of friendship with great pastors like Pam and Jackie. I think the program is just really super as far as leading them down their faith journey.
I joined when I was 11 years old, and known every pastor that has been here since then. And I really enjoy having both sets of families. My wife's family is involved with the church too, so it's a family thing.
Of course, I think that the hope of the church, or the future of the church, is in our children and in our youth. And the diversity, which has been the foundational piece of this faith community, has created a safe place for our children and youth to learn how to be critical thinkers. And to be critical thinkers means that they will have authentic faith for themselves. And that's not only the fulfillment of the hope of this faith community, but it's also the fulfillment of the hope for God's promise in making our world a healthy and whole place to be.
Giving back to the community and helping other people, that's just part of my core now. It's part of who I am. And I just feel like I probably owe that to the Methodist Church there in Loomis. So now I'm bringing my kids in there, and with the hope that they'll receive the same type of benefits that I have.
And I look forward to the future, our legacy that we're building, and hope that my children's children's children can also experience such a wonderful faith community that we have.
Sublett.